And I had all these Ishmaels coming at me, trying to distract me and bring me back to my past, keep me from my future. Hello and welcome. My name is Heather, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about some ways that you may know that God is preparing you for marriage. If you're new here on this channel, I share content all about how to have healthy relationships and prepare for a healthy marriage. So if that is something you're interested in, then be sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more videos on those topics. So for many years, I had the desire for marriage in my heart. I knew I wanted to be married. And there was a season of time where I felt very discontent with my singleness. And I was just ready to meet the person that God had for me. I really very strongly wanted to get married. I saw all of my friends and everyone I know getting engaged and getting married and having multiple kids. I just remember feeling like really left out and like really struggling. But something shifted in me just before meeting my husband. It was probably about 6 to 7 months before I actually did meet my husband that God started to work in me and change my heart. And I could really see that He was really and truly preparing me for marriage at that time. And I felt in my spirit that it was coming soon. It was no longer just a desire that I had, but it was really something that I felt like He was preparing me for actively, and that was going to be right around the horizon. So the first way that you might know that God is preparing you for marriage is that you are growing in your relationship with Him. This was one of the biggest things that started to happen just before I met my spouse. Yes, I already had a relationship with God, but in this season, I literally put everything else aside, and that was my primary focus, was spending time with Him every single day. Every morning, I would stay home instead of going out to some of the things that I used to do. I started cutting things out of my life that I didn't feel like aligned with that relationship that I wanted to have with Him and the woman that I wanted to be. And that's when I really started to see some big changes start to happen within me. So if you are finding that you are growing in your relationship with God, that's a really good sign that He might be preparing you for a covenant marriage relationship, because marriage is a relationship that is meant to be modeled after Christ and the church. So not only will you have the benefit of growing in your relationship with God, because that's the main thing that's going to fulfill you, but you'll also be better equipped to enter into a marriage that is built on love, trust, and commitment as you are building those things in your relationship with Christ. Number 2 is that you are becoming more mature and responsible. Marriage, after all, does require a high level of maturity and responsibility in order to be a healthy marriage. So as you grow in your faith and your life experiences, you'll be better equipped to also be prepared for a future marriage. There were a couple of ways that I felt like this was happening for me just before I met my spouse. One of them was I had finally established a career that I felt good about and that I had really spent a lot of time preparing for. And the second way, and probably the biggest, was that I finally realized that I needed to get out of debt and start being more responsible in the way I was spending my money. When I was younger, I had always been really, really good at saving money, but somewhere along the way, I think in college is where I really started to lose sight of good money management. I had gotten into a large amount of student loan debt. And then in addition to that, I had started traveling because I thought, oh, what the heck, I'm single. I am going to travel as much as possible and do this while I can, while I'm young. And I absolutely encourage you to do that if you have the money for it. But I did not have the money for it, so I had financed those trips. So on top of that student loan debt, I had credit card debt. And even though I had a good job, I really felt like I was barely scraping by, and it added so much stress to my life. It was maybe a little over a year before I met my husband that I ended up paying off about $24,000 just by myself. And then after getting married, we did become debt free. But it was in that season that God really shifted something in my heart and in my mind through my family and through different people who spoke into me and helped me learn how to budget and really take my relationship with money seriously. that I began to really grow and change in that area. And I can't tell you how grateful I am that I did that before getting married. Having that preparation and having that mindset shift really changed how I handled money once we got married. So that's just my example of how I grew in that area. But if there's some other way that you feel like you might be growing suddenly in a maturity and in responsibility, that could be a good sign that God is preparing you for marriage as well. All right, number 3 is that you are developing healthy communication skills. I talk about communication all the time on my channel and how important it is, not just in your dating life, but in preparing for marriage and in marriage itself. So if you're finding that you're building your communication skills, that's a very good sign that you are also preparing for marriage. As you learn to communicate effectively with your friends, your family, your coworkers, you are going to also be better prepared to communicate with your future spouse. One of the ways that you might see this happen in your life, and one of the that you might be developing in this area, is that God is presenting you with more opportunities to practice your communication. Maybe you've been given speaking engagements. Maybe you've been given leadership roles. Maybe you've had more conflict come up in your life that you've had to navigate through and communicate effectively to overcome. So just be on the lookout for those things and keep honing those skills, because that is definitely a good sign. So that actually takes us right into number 4, and that is that you are learning to resolve conflict in a healthy way. This one is huge. This is something I feel like I am still a work in progress at, but I definitely saw this in my life as well as I felt marriage was coming on the horizon for me, through conflict with friends, through conflict with my boss. And I'm not saying that I handled those conflicts perfectly, but God was definitely presenting them to me so that I could get that practice and that I could hone those skills. And looking back, I can definitely think of some situations that I wish I had handled better, but I'm also very thankful that I had those opportunities before getting married to start learning about how to resolve conflict and getting that practice. Whether I did it perfectly or not, I still learned from it and I still grew from it. The next one is that you are actively working through healing from past trauma. This was very, very big for me. There was a point just before meeting my spouse where I had gotten out of a bad relationship with someone who was not good for me at all. But the thing about it is that it finally made me look within and realize that I needed to make some change, that I was the common denominator. I finally realized that there was a reason that I had continued to date the same type of man over and over again. And I continued to be in one toxic relationship after another. And it wasn't because of them. It wasn't because of anyone else. It was because of me and the things that I needed healing from and that I needed to delve into in order to break that toxic cycle. This was one of the most difficult seasons of my life. It was hard and it was painful. It was not fun at all, but it was crucial in preparing me for my spouse and preparing me to be a whole, healthy person when I did finally meet him. And during that time, I did a ton of self-reflection. I did a ton of reading. I did a ton of prayer and study, and literally went back through every single relationship I had ever had and figured out that there was a connection to the type of people that I was choosing. And a lot of it had to do with a lack of self-worth, a lack of self-confidence, and a lack of knowing who I was in Christ. I did see a spirit-led Christian counselor during that time, and she really helped me work through some of that as well. But like I said, this was crucial in preparing me to be the person that I needed to be when I did meet my spouse. So if you're finding that this is something that's happening to you, that you are finally realizing some common denominators, that you are really realizing some connections from your past that you're needing to work through and that you're needing to heal from, that you are breaking off cycles, that you are finding healing, and that you're becoming a healthier person emotionally, this is one way that you might know that God is preparing you for marriage. Had I not worked through that stuff and found healing from it, I don't think that I would have even approached my spouse. And I don't know if I would have even been attractive to him, because one of the things that he told me when we met that attracted him the most to me was my sense of self-worth. And we really do often attract what we are. So again, this is probably one of the most important ways that I knew God was preparing my heart for marriage. Next is that you are praying for God's guidance and provision. Marriage is a huge decision, so it's really important that you are seeking his guidance, that you are seeking clarity, that you're asking about his opinion about who you date, and you're actually listening to it, that you are finally ready to turn away people who God does not have for you, or get out of a situationship maybe that you've been in that God has told you to let go of. One of the ways that this looked for me was that I started really seeking and praying God about everyone who approached me. During this time, there was someone who reached out to me from my past, and before I would just have responded probably immediately and engaged with this person and probably met up with them. But since I had been spending so much time with God and seeking his guidance, and I really wanted to get it right this time, I went straight to him in prayer and asked him whether I needed to talk to this person, what I should do, how I should handle this situation. And I really think that he protected me from getting caught up with the wrong person again because of my seeking his guidance and his counsel. And literally right after I had prayed about it, I came upon a blog post about the specific thing that I had been praying and asking for with this person that gave me the clarity that I needed. So that leads me into the last way that you may know that God is preparing you for marriage, and that's that you're all of a sudden experiencing a whole lot of temptation, like extra temptation, more than the norm. So to give you an example, one of the ways that this looked like for me was that guys from my past just started coming out of the woodwork, trying to talk to me again. And this is one of the tactics that the enemy will use to keep us from God's best for us. He will send distraction. And I had all these Ishmaels coming at me, trying to distract me and bring me back to my past, keep me from my future. And thank God I had already been spending all of this time in prayer and getting discernment, because I knew that's what was happening. I could sense it in my spirit that this was just another test that I needed to pass. And I was not even honestly tempted to engage with any of these people. It was so easy to just block, move on, not even give them the time of day, not even give them the chance to get in there and distract me and bring me back to what was not good for me. Like I mentioned before, marriage is a representation of Christ and the church. It's a very big deal, and Satan doesn't want that for us. And because it is such a sacred union, I believe the enemy really comes after it really hard and really strong. And he knows that when you are put with that person that is God's best for you, how incredibly powerful that can be. And he wants to stop it. And I really believe that's what was happening in this season of my life, when all of these exes were coming at me. And I'm so thankful that I was able to recognize it and shut it down immediately. Whereas in the past, I would not have responded that way. I would have probably gone back into those same sin patterns and gotten caught up into those same toxic emotions and toxic relationships. So that is just one of the ways that that could look. But if you are feeling like you are getting tempted from every direction and that you're really having to stand strong, that could be a really good sign and a possible way that God could be showing you that he is preparing you for marriage as well. So that is it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. I hope that it encourages you in some way if you are seeing some of these signs. And even if you aren't seeing any of these signs yet, don't let that be a discouragement to you. Just let that be motivation to start working through some of the things that you need to work through, to start looking out for some of these things as they are coming up in your life. And of course, just because these things are happening, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to meet your spouse soon. That was the case for me, and I did feel that in my spirit that he was coming soon, but that does not necessarily mean that will be everyone's story. These are just some of the ways that I did feel like he showed me that he was preparing me, and that he might show you as well. So if any of these really stood out to you, if any of these things are happening to you, then be sure to leave that in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And if you have any ideas on what you would like to see me talk about in the future, you can also leave that in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye.